Hello, I'm Matteo, and welcome to the second episode of Metz and Matteo Presents Inspiration Friday. Today is July 17th, 2020, and we're going to continue on with the topic for this month, Happenstance. Last week, I showed you several images and discussed the technical problems with their either development or manufacturing process that resulted in the final prints, how those defects were in fact, I think, personally enhancements. I also had mentioned a roll of film that I had shot. Actually, my friend Dennis and I shot it together, sharing the camera. It's my father's 35mm single lens reflex camera, first time I ever used it. And so I wasn't quite familiar with how to set f-stops and shutter speeds properly. Having no formal or informal training, just took the camera out and started shooting. And when I got the film developed and received it back from the processor, it was very disappointing because the images didn't come out how I expected them to. And so, like I said last week, I put them in negative sleeves, filed them away, and forgot about them for decades. And about 15 or so years ago, I started getting interested in photography, in film in particular, playing around with my friend Dennis's camera. It was a Holga 120S, little plastic, they call them toy cameras, and created some images. And as I was processing those and putting those away and examining them and figuring out how to store them, I came across these other old negatives. And at that point, digital technology, personal laptops, and so forth were pretty advanced. And I had access to a scanner, so I scanned some of the images and put together a slideshow, partly out of nostalgia, but also realizing how fun and interesting sort of my teen years were, and how good these prints at this particular roll of film, well, say good, but I guess arty or interesting or atmospheric, the defects and mistakes that were made during the process, the creation process. And how I think that lend a certain aura to the images. And anyways, it's kind of a catalyst for me to continue working in photography. And subsequently, I moved and went back to school and ended up in a darkroom learning formally how to shoot and process and print film. And so I'm going to show you slides and narrate discussing these images. And if you want to see the video after watching this episode, feel free to visit our YouTube channel and also Facebook. And then, of course, here on Instagram, you can also watch the video. It's posted in our IGTV section. So off to the slides. For this first image, it's a picture of this abandoned schoolhouse that we being my friend Metz and Dennis, came across. I think one of them knew about it, and so we decided to drive out in the middle of nowhere in the country, and it was difficult to find. And but it was the perfect setting for arty photos. And so we got dressed up and drove out and found this place. And I carried along my father's 35mm SLR Pentax. Had never used one before, didn't have a clue what I was doing. And so obviously the shutter speed was too slow for handheld photos, but I took photos anyway. And I think that's why I was disappointed when I got the roll of film back from the processor, that many of the images were blurry. And I again, was disappointed because they weren't perfect. And then with fresh eyes later on, realized that this blurriness added kind of a interesting atmosphere to the images. You get time away from something that you've done, which was years, I think, later, like 10 or more years later. I pulled these out and took a look at them and thought, it's okay that they're blurry. Of course, nowadays it's trendy and people call it defocused, but that's just, I think, an excuse to cover up for the fact that people didn't know what they were doing when they took the photos, and I didn't. But I still think because of this sort of vernacular quality that was given to these images, especially now that I'm older and can look back and go, oh, we were young, we didn't know what we were doing. Hence the name of the slideshow that this is included in. Some of these images came out blurry. This image Dennis took of me. This is me looking out a window. And you can see some ghosting on my hand and on some of the keys. It's my lovely jean jacket with keys, my key jacket. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist anymore. But anyway, this is inside this abandoned schoolhouse, and I believe I put a flash unit on it, which I also didn't know what I was doing and didn't sync it correctly with the camera. So when the 35mm SLR takes a photo, there's actually a curtain in the back that slides over and exposes the film. It doesn't, it's not like a leaf shutter where it opens and exposes the entire negative at once simultaneously and then closes. There's actually a curtain that goes across the back, and so you can sync your flash to open at the beginning of the curtain or at the end and get all sorts of different effects. This is something I didn't learn until several years ago when I was taking photography classes at the community college, and I was still not a flash taker. I don't like flash units, whether they're on camera or off camera. I've taken studio classes and have never really had very good luck using them. And most of that's just because I don't really do a lot of work that requires flash, and you really do need to have a lot of experience with them in order to understand how they'll work, because you can't really see what it's going to look like until after you've taken the photo and either looked on your digital screen or developed the film and look at the film. But anyway, this is another sort of mistake that happened because of our technical naivete and ignorance. But later, especially knowing that this is an abandoned school building, sort of looks like, oh, there's a ghost in there. And just kind of gives it, again, this effect and feeling that would be absent if this came out crystal clear. And I'm going to show and share one more image with you from this. This final image is of myself, again, taken by Dennis. And this one, you can really see the effect of the lack of sync with, or the incorrect syncing with the flash unit on the camera, because my face and my clothing are sharp. Therefore, the shutter speed was fast enough to take this image handheld. We did not have a tripod. And I still came out clear, but there is this halo going on around the brim of the hat. You can see sort of how in the highlight area on the right, that is pretty stark. So that was caused by the flash unit. And so what actually I think is happening is that natural light is coming in and creating one set of shadows, and the flash unit is creating another set of shadows. And that's because as the flash unit is going off at a different time as the curtain is going across the plane of the film. And so we get this really cool halo effect that I personally don't know if I could ever recreate. But I thought was supremely interesting and apropos for this abandoned building. These are just 3 of the many images included in our video slideshow when we were young, which again you can see on our YouTube channel, Instagram, and on Facebook for Metz and Matteo. And I attribute my love of photography now from these early experiences I had with some 2 very close friends, where we explored just creating and having fun, and even not knowing what we were doing, I think in some way was more important than having preconceived ideas of, we're going to go out, we're going to shoot this at this location, and it's going to look like, X, Y, and Z. And though I feel like making plans is very important for the photography I'm creating now, I know I must leave room for experimentation and for disasters and for chance encounters and happenstance to happen within my artwork, within the photographs I take, within anything that I create, because of situations like this where there was an end result that was desirable. So I think the importance of having the courage of being comfortable with being uncomfortable with what you create or what you're doing is a great life lesson that I've learned, and I guess that's something that I'm trying to share here, especially right now in this uncertain time we're living through. There's lots of things happening that we didn't plan. Some, of course, incredibly terrible, but I think a lot of times just completely mundane, and the sense of unknown. And so I feel like if we allow ourselves to be open to these new opportunities that can come our way, instead of thinking strictly on having predefined ideas of what the world should be, we can allow this sort of, like I've said before, divine inspiration into our lives. So I'm going to continue the next 2 weeks discussing Happenstance. Next week I'm going to focus on some of the untitled film stills from Cindy Sherman. It's her first sort of large body of work, and how Happenstance crept into her work and just sort of helped create some of the look and feel of her photographs. So if you enjoyed this episode, again, please share with your network of family and friends. I appreciate your support.